Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Sample Chapter Podcast. I am your host, Jason A. Meiske, and oh my gosh, we have a wonderful discussion for you today. A great interview, if I do say so myself. We are talking to someone I have had the absolute pleasure to speak with twice before. Making his third trip back here to the show is Gary Morgenstein. And you know, the unique thing about this interview is that in the past, what we've been doing is discussing his Dark Depths books. They are a sci-fi, dystopian, speculative fiction baseball story after World War III. And we have followed this series from book 1 that we listened to back in 2020 on episode 118. Book 2 was in 2021, episode 167. And now here we are with episode 250. Gary's returning with book 3, the finale of the series. And, this is a unique thing for the show. It's the first time that I have had somebody on covering the same series and, throughout. And, this is pretty exciting. I can't wait for you to be able to hear what all Gary has been up to, everything that he's, put into this book, and the ups and downs of writing a series and coming to a conclusion with it. It's been almost 100 episodes since he was last here, so there's a whole lot that we're discussing, how the sausage is made, to use a phrase from Gary. But yeah, we're talking about all that. We have, one of the other wonderful discussions is how books are a unique entertainment experience. And, one of the phrases that Gary uses, again, to quote Gary, that just really caught my attention when he says, "The characters are the ones who live in the reader's mind after." And I just thought that was a profound statement. It was really great. This is just such an enjoyable, delightful chat. I always have a really nice time with Gary because he is himself just a very pleasant and enjoyable person. And I know you're going to really enjoy this discussion coming up here in just a moment. And you get to hear in the interview too that Gary is indeed in New York, and you get a little bit of the sounds of New York in the background, and that's that's always fun to get unique background sounds. Speaking of unique background sounds, I've had a few of you have caught on to the sound of coffee brewing during my opening segment like this here in the last few episodes. Yeah, I've been recording these in a different section of the house, in the dining room actually, and the coffee maker is right beside me. So today, I don't have the coffee maker going yet. It's loaded and ready to go, but yeah, no coffee going yet. But of course, that means I've been brewing my favorite, which is the Writer's Block coffee. They have 3 delicious flavors that you can choose from. You can order one or order them all, set them up on automatic shipping if you like. And whenever you do, make sure you use the coupon code SAMPLECHAPTER to save 10% off your order. They are an affiliate of the show, which means ordering through them using my code, that gets a little something back for the show, helps us keep the lights on, as they like to say in podcasting world. But yeah, rest assured, as soon as I'm done with this section right now, I'm going to hit that start button and have myself a nice cup of Writer's Block coffee ready to go to finish editing this episode. So click that link in the show notes to find out more. Don't forget to also click the link in the show notes for our podcast friends at Pop Culture Network. They have about 10 other shows in the network, all of them wonderful, all of them fun, and all of them pop culture related. So whether you like hearing about movies or celebrity gossip, or you just like discussing comics or, even books like this show, there's something in there for everyone. So click that link in the show notes to find out more. I've been having a really nice time this past week since Bandit 2, Bandit Underground, the pre-order has gone live, and that's done really well. Bandit 1 I put up on sale through the weekend, and oh my gosh, I was blown away with the reception of that. it did very well, and I humbly thank you. It's the first time so far as an author where one of my books reached number two in a category, reached number two in one category, reached 18 in another, and I was in the top 6,000 across ebooks on Amazon. So that was a really cool experience. I took a picture of that, and I kept coming back. I kept taking a look to see if I was going to cross that bestseller ranking, but it just couldn't quite crack that, get past number two. So, but that's all right. I am humbly grateful for getting that high, because the next day, once the sale was over, the very next day I went from number two up to over 1,000 in the same category. So I mean, it just kind of goes to show how competitive it is in the author's world. But Bandit 2, the edits are coming along nicely. Completed another round just the other day, over the weekend, which was not easy because I was watching that amazing Chiefs game in Germany that was taking place. So that was, I was very distracted during that game. But yeah, I got finished up another round of editing, and beginning to move some things around now to change up the pacing. I want to adjust that part of it, and then I'm going to be playing it for my ears to see how it sounds, to see what it would be like if it was being read on like an Audible or something like that. And that's a good way to catch more mistakes whenever you're editing. So looking forward to that coming up. Meanwhile, I think it's time to go ahead and get that transition and hop on over to our interview with the delightful Gary Morgenstein. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back. Hey, I have a wonderful guest that I know because he's a now 3-time guest of the show. A guest that really needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Gary Morgenstein is our guest, and Gary is the critically acclaimed author of the Dark Depths series, A Mound Over Hell, Fastball for Freedom, and the book he's going to be talking about today, A Dugout to Peace. Gary's an award-winning playwright. His works include A Black and White Cookie, A Tomato Can't Grow in the Bronx, Dancing on Glass, and Walking Charlie. Morgenstein's work has been featured in New York Times, Entertainment Weekly, Parade Magazine, and the New York Post, Sports Illustrated, Fox News Radio, and NPR. From out of Brooklyn, New York, and previous guest to the show, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome back to the show a dear friend, Gary Morgenstein.
Thank you, Jason. I'm delighted to be here. Hi, everyone.
I'm so happy to have you back.
And, same here.
What a journey it's been. Oh my gosh, we've covered this whole series, starting with Mound Over Hell back in 2020, Fastball for Freedom in 21, which, and I didn't realize, so I was getting all this set up, that we connected like within 9 months and like 50 something episodes in between, but still we got together pretty quick. And so now it's like, wow, it's been 2 years.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah. And the journey began, I first started writing it in May 2015. Actually, the way the sausage is made for writers, my wife and I, it was a Sunday morning. My wife and I are listening to the Beatles and having a breakfast of everything bagels with cream cheese with a schmear. For those of you who know, who might be aware of what that means. And it popped into my head. What about a novel about baseball's last season in an America which has lost World War III, and the nation is now run by something called the family, and the leader is called Grandma. I thought, not so bad. But now it made a little flesh on them, now you got to put it together. And now, it's going to be 1,600 pages later over 3 books. Dugout to Peace comes out December 5th, and it's gotten so far very lovely advanced reviews. It's called Powerful. The Boys of Summer Save the World, which essentially is what happens. And it's dystopian, and it's political, and it's baseball. But the thing when you write a dystopian novel is you're not a prophet. Okay, you're not predicting the future. I think that's very foolish. I mean, as
Mm-hmm.
all we have to do is, wake up every morning and say, "Oh, what happened? What?" Right? Uh, but you want to have a world which people will say, "Oh, I could see that happening in my world."
Mm.
A Mound Over Hell opens up in 2098 uh, after America and the West has lost World War III to the Islamic Empire. All right, there we go.
Uh-huh.
Democracy is dead. Patriotism is dead. Religion is dead. Well, this not everything's bad because social media is banned under the anti-narcissism laws. So there's something positive to be said about that. And it's a kind of a nanny state where America's become, and baseball discredited, disgraced for being associated with the old great America, which
Mm-hmm.
people felt that hubris led us into war and led to our downfall, begins its final season down to two teams who play at crumbling Amazon Stadium, the ballpark formerly known as Yankee Stadium. And then
Yeah.
by some sort of fluke, magic, it gets explained down the road. A couple of great players from the past show up, Mickey Mantle, and then a courtly Southern gentleman, Ty Cobb, and then from the near future, who will be one of the all-time greats, Mushi Lopez, a woman who switch hitting. She's kind of like the Shohei Ohtani of 2050s and 60s, and she was also a social activist. And baseball is revived, but baseball becomes a pawn because there's elements in America and elements in the Islamic Empire who would like real peace. And there are elements on both sides who don't want that. And
Mm-hmm.
so over time, over the 3 books, baseball becomes sort of the epicenter of resistance, of ordinary people who had no desire to become heroes, but they're thrust into these roles and they try to bring the world together again. And it's really, at the end of the day, it's about faith, and not faith in a god or religion. It's not that, but faith in ourselves and each other to get through the darkness. Because I think writers, I mean, nowadays, and then I'll come up for breath and let you ask another question. Nowadays, there's so much social messaging in entertainment, and I think, and that's great. I mean, it should be. Writers, artists hold up a mirror to society. We've been doing that, going back to the ancient Greeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the government stinks. Okay, and that and this is wrong, and that's what artists do. But I think what has happened now is it's just accusations, and it's just negativity and finger pointing and polarization. And it's one thing to say, yes, this is wrong, whatever your subject is. I don't care. But ultimately, you must show it through people, and you must show a light. You must give a path ahead, not a squeaky, gooey, sentimental path, but just to show that amid all the carnage, amid the dystopia, amid all the problems, there might be a way forward. There might be hope. And I think that's really important, which my books ultimately do.
Yeah, and I agree. Hope is something to, at the end of the day, no matter how dark it is, hope is all we have left sometimes.
That's right.
And
yes. Well, that's why we're still here.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, so you came out with book one. It did really well. Book two, set the stage, and it brought things together where it really set up book three. Now you got book three coming out. Discuss a little bit of bringing it all home. Bringing it home, so to speak. What was it like? Did you see the end of the series in your mind? Did you know how you wanted to finish it, or did it the picture kind of come clearer as you were going?
I had a vague idea where I wanted to end. But the path of getting there was a mystery. I mean, I really envy writers who have it all planned out. I just don't. My wife, early in the process, she set up this cardboard. She called it a genius board, and I was going to put up all the notes on Post-its. And, this scene and that scene and this character and this arc and blah, 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 blah. And I did it. I spent like an entire afternoon jotting down notes and putting it up there, and I never looked at it again because that's right. Never. She said, "Oh, don't you want to look at it?" Well, no, because it changes. And that's the joy of writing. Writing is really hard. I think, people say, "Oh, I got a great idea." I say, "Well, for a book, God bless you. Go ahead, do it." But remember, you're going to be editing and editing and editing. Because if you're a writer, you're wrong most of the time because you've just written something and said, "Oh, that doesn't work." Just think about it, right? You know what I'm talking about. It's just writing and writing. And I don't actually know all the time where I'm going to go in scene by scene. I start. This scene is going to be about this. And now I know this is going to sound trippy, but you've had enough writers who, and I know I'm not the first person to say it, but their characters take over. You're suddenly writing, and the scene is changing because the characters say, "You're a schmuck. I wouldn't write like that. What do you think? What are you thinking?" I say, "All right, fine. Take over. Just do whatever you want." And that's what happens. And it's a fascinating process. And people can say, "Well, wait, you're being really precious because you created the characters." Well, I guess I happen to, the way I feel is that the door just opens and in they walk and they have their names. It's rare that I will ever change someone's name. In these books, because I wanted to be respectful of everyone, I would research, well, what's a common name, common Muslim name, for example, last name, because I did research, and it's and the book does it encompasses America and Europe, the Caliphate of Europe and its various nations occupied under the Islamic Empire. And I wanted to be respectful and not just come up and, you want to use the real names or likely names. But other than that, I don't change anything. You dig deeper, you learn more about the characters and they reveal themselves to you. But so to me, the fun process is kind of having an idea where you're going and being a little surprised about
it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's funny. We've talked about that before, about characters that take over. And I just had that happen a couple of days ago. I'm in the process right now of my edits on book 2 of my own series. And much the same way, I don't plan it out, but I ran into an issue writing book 2 where I started writing book 3 by accident. So I did go back and I made notes at the top of about 16 chapters saying, in this chapter, this is supposed to happen, and then this is supposed to happen, and then he meets this, and blah, blah, blah. And then I went through, and that helped keep me just on track of, okay, yeah, just stick to this storyline. Don't dive into book 3 yet. And I had some chapters where in an effort to have progress, I just kept some things very plain. And I said, like, well, yeah, there was a battle. They came out of it, and then this happened, and then this character did this. And then now I'm like kind of fleshing out some of that. So I had a character who did something that it was just like, oh my gosh, yeah, that just makes total sense. And it was one of those situations where the character was letting me know,
yeah,
hey, this is what's going to happen, and here's how that's going to make sense. And I looked at it and was like, oh, this is great. I love it. Now, it did present a problem now that I have to go back to towards the beginning of the book and fix something else. I'm like, well, how do I fix that now? And it's like I can hear the character saying, hey, that's your problem. You figure out how to fix that.
Exactly. Right. Your name's on the front of the cover. So yeah.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I don't know. You're the writer. You figure out how I got there to begin with.
Yes.
This is just what works now.
Yes. And it takes a while. It takes a long time. I did I dug out to piece the last book is manuscript pages. were about 900, just over 900.
Hmm.
And I must have edited 9 times, 10 times, really. And you always catch something. I'm not talking about typos. There's always something where you say, well, okay, that could be better. But at a certain point, though, you must the pencils down.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just. I mean, there's a uh, Albert Camus, the famous French existential writer. One of his novels was The Plague, and in the book, there's a town clerk who has spent like 8 years working on the opening paragraph of his novel about this woman who rides into the town square on a horse naked. For like 8 years, he's worked on this one paragraph, and then he gets the plague and dies. So it's kind of like Camus saying, "Okay, see, see, you got to let it go. You got to, because writing is always organic. It's let's be honest. Yes, there are times when you say, "Wow, that's right, that's perfect," but almost everything could always, well, maybe I should have done this, and you just have to let it be, because at a certain point, it's not up to the writer. You've got to let the reader decide, and however they decide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. You got to let it go at some point, and it is what it is from there. Um,
Yes.
and and that's an interesting aspect I have. What does the reader think? And they'll, and you can talk to them, readers at different events, or you hear something from someone, and they say, "Oh yeah, in this one scene or this, and it just spoke to me because they were doing this," and I'm kind of looking at them, going, "They did? I don't remember. I don't remember that."
Yes.
And I'm wanting to like dive back, look to see how this, and I don't know. I don't have the same experience, but it's fascinating how books, I think more than any other genre of entertainment, books affect people differently, and it's a really unique experience.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. And I think when you say that, I've thought about that, and the why, because I also, as you say, I also write plays. So then you have the immediacy. Okay. You have the live, and if you have a talk back, people just the same experiences. Oh, that character did this, and you're like, oh, I don't think they did, but you don't say anything. But I think, and I want to hear why you think so too. With novels, it's all in your head. With
Mm-hmm.
a movie, TV, theater, someone else is in the roles.
Yeah,
Someone else
yeah,
is doing really the hard job of imagining what these people look like. And because we can describe all we want what a character looks like, but at the end of the day, man, my blue ain't your blue,
yeah,
right? And
exactly.
so, three people are going to read your character description, and you say, well, find me a photograph online of the person who you think looks like that, and it's going to be pretty different.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah,
think that's why it is the uniqueness of a novel, which makes it so beautiful and so splendid, and why ultimately you have to revert back to these characters, because it's the characters who linger in the mind. It's,
yeah.
right? That's, you in a movie, you don't say, oh, wow, you keep thinking about the CGI. Well, I hope not. But it's the people who touch you, their journeys.
Oh my gosh. I totally agree. And it's like you're saying, it's all so subjective, and it's somebody who reads the same book. There's so much of it's going to be based on their experiences in life and
Right.
where they are. And like you said, I was at a writers conference one time, and somebody mentioned, oh, well, what if somebody writes something like I do? And the teacher says, like, well, it's not really a problem. It's not really something that's going to happen. He goes, let's do an experiment. So he wrote up just a line up on it. And what he did was he did one line. He goes, all right, here's our story. Okay. And then people would raise their hands, and it was like, let's get a setting, let's get a name, and then a problem. And so, and these were random people in the class would shout out, okay. And then he would pick, okay, yeah, there we go. So here's three things. Now take the next 30 minutes and write a story about this name, this plot, and this setting. And everybody had something completely different, even though it was
Sure.
about the same thing. And reading is just like that. It's gonna be, you could be reading the same thing, but you'll have a completely different experience. And I think that's why whenever it comes to movies or plays even, it's the director, the producers, their interpretation of it. And if you've read the book beforehand, you're like, oh yeah, I don't think that's how that's supposed
Yeah.
to be.
Well, because with the novel, good or bad, it's your name there. That's it.
Yeah.
You blame Gary, blame Jason, praise Gary, praise Jason, but it's us. Uh, I know at least theater where you collaborate, and that's wonderful. I mean, there's a wonderfulness about it when you write a play, and people have different input and insights and perceptions of the characters, and then they dig in and they create backstories for characters, which is
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Well, do you think the character would? And I say, sure, I guess. Okay, because you can only think back so much. So the characters do that. The director does that. Um, they'll emphasize different lines. It's a very interesting, but also, they'll ask, why did you write that line? I mean, and sometimes, Jason, sometimes it just sounds good. You don't have any great, right? It's not like,
Yeah.
heaven touched your forehead. It just, well, yep, that's good, and you don't want to sound
Yep.
too stupid, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such an experience wherever I had it in mind how I wanted to end a scene. But then again, the characters are talking to me and it's flowing organically through. And I get to a part where it's like, oh, there doesn't need to be any more words here. Like
Yeah.
that's the end right there. And I'm left with all these words and like this, oh, I wanted to have this epic, phrase here at the end. It's like, but it's not necessary. It
Yeah.
takes away from the emotions of the way this ended right here. So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, let me write this down
Yes.
somewhere though, because I like it, but
Yes.
I won't put it here, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's always, and look, a lot, it's guesswork. It's
Yeah.
constant guesswork because no one's, as you're writing it, no one's saying, oh yeah, good or bad, but you're doing it. You have to decide whether it fits or not.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Sometimes you don't want to hit the reader over the head. I mean, you could be dramatic, but you don't want to go over the top
Mm-hmm.
because you've got to
Yeah.
step back and give them right. You've got to give them room. And I don't like when writers, inject themselves so much. It's it's not what I thought I wrote. It's what you thought I wrote, and you've got to give them that room
Yeah.
because there's no
Exactly.
wrong. I mean, if they get the name wrong, for example, okay, that's wrong. But for the most part, like we said, whatever you do, and it's a process. It's a fascinating process. I've been writing. My first experience doing stories, I was in first grade, as I'm told by as my parents had told me the story. And my mother gets called to school. Now, this is back in the days when your mother got called to school. That was scary. That was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this was not like today where it's just the Wild West. All right, and the teacher had my mother look through the window, the glass window pane in the front door. They used to have them, and they were metal grilled and all. And there I was with pencils, making up stories and screaming and yelling. And the teacher said, I don't want to, can control or curb his creativity, but the class is listening to him, not me.
Ah.
So, and that was my first experience. But of course, in the Bronx in those days, it was thought, all right, maybe our son, something's wrong with him. Yeah. Well, this is a little weird. Okay, this is not how a first grader behaves, but it is if you're creative. And that was my really first introduction to writing. I was maybe 8 or 9. I was writing short stories about this shortstop for the Yankees named Davey. I forget his last name. And I would write. I would write because I think, and this is again not especially unique, but artists, writers, if you have like difficult families and you want to escape, that's what I used to do. I would escape my very difficult family and hide out in the room and make things up where the world came out a lot better.
Hmm.
And now, of course, the trick is you have to come back to the real world. Some people, they
Right.
stay there. Well, that's not good. That then you need a lot of medicine. But that's what writers and artists, performers do. We go into our little world where it's safer and it's more easily controlled.
Well said. Well said. Well, speaking of worlds that are controlled, what was what was it like to complete this series, the Dark Depths? To reach the end of it. This is the end. What was that feeling?
Well, there's a little sadness,
Mm-hmm.
honest. I mean, there was the sense of accomplishment, but I've been with these characters, almost all of them, um, for 8.5 years. And to say goodbye to them, a few died along the way, not many, but it happens. But none of the
Mm-hmm.
really, no main character died. It made me, it teared me up to think that I would not be writing them and I would not be hanging out with them. It was a very emotional feeling to put it aside.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it was. That's it. And to like you said, spend so much time with them, and then to write the end,
Yeah.
and yeah, and kind of like we were talking about before, to then push it aside and say it's over.
Yes.
I mean, what an accomplishment.
Yes. But I can always reread it. So, but I don't
There
think
you
I'm
go.
gonna, but I think I said what I had to say. I
Yeah.
think I mean, the book ends, the characters come together, there is closure for them, but not people don't like walk off into the distance, skipping and holding hands. I leave
Hmm.
a world, like I said, where there is hope, where there have been achievements, but it's still perilous. It's still on the precipice, and still requires people trusting and working towards peace and towards
Hmm.
understanding and the belief, which I mean, one thing that usually resonates in my work is that there's more that unites us than divides us.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah, I mean, it's easy to say that. You don't see a lot of instances of it around, especially of late. Um, but at the end of the day, I want to believe there's most people are good, and I'm not sounding, like Anne Frank in the attic say, people are basically good. But I think basically people are decent and are good. And we just get put to at each other. And I don't, I think we have to find our way back to that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's wonderful. So before we finish up here, I wanted to hear a little bit about what you've been up to the past 2 years since we last spoke. I know you had some plays. What all else you've been working on?
Well, I think this book and the plays, my play, A Black and White Cookie, this past summer opened in Los Angeles and in New Jersey. For a while, it was actually running simultaneously for a couple weekends.
Hmm.
And it's about the relationship between a conservative African American newsstand owner and an eccentric communist Jew who get together and take on the system. And again, there's more that unites us than divides us. And my latest play, Dancing on Glass, which is oh so timely, and it's about takes on anti-Zionism and political bullying at a private school in Brooklyn. So it couldn't be more timely,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. So what's next for you as far as novel wise? Do you have an idea?
I have an idea. I don't want to say
Yeah.
yet because right now I have the title. I thought, oh, that's a good title. Oh, I like that. Wow. I usually don't say that, but I was like, wow, that's a good title. And then so I kind of know what the story would be, as much as I ever know. But until you start writing, you don't know. You
Right.
don't know. It won't be dystopian. It won't be set in the future. be more contemporary and a smaller cast.
Okay, that's great. And that's something that I had thought about asking about with the series, and it sounds like you're kind of looking into this here, and it's something that I'm dealing with my series, is that struggle to stay focused on a central storyline and not allow the world to grow, because every book it's going to continue to grow a little bit, but at some point it's like, oh man, it's going to get out of hand, and it's like, here's a storyline, there's a storyline, oh, here's the quote bad guys and their storyline as well, because everybody's got a story, but it's like,
yeah,
you got to have that through line of where
yes.
people can follow this main story.
Yes. And I try not to, I have some bad guys, but I try not to have bad guys, even when I disagree with, even when I disagree with a character.
Mm-hmm.
I like to show them enough respect to give their point of view.
Yeah.
And to make it sincere. And I think that's really important. Sometimes the writers, they have their avatars. And I think we really need, you need to present all points of view, whether you like it or not. Because as we know, there's some nasty stuff out there. But then it's up to the audience to decide. Ultimately, it's up to the audience. You can't say, well, this is how you to believe, because I don't, I believe very strongly in freedom of thought. Yeah.
I agree. Well, Gary, where can people find and follow you?
Well, you could go, my books are at, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, yada, yada. If you go to, my publisher is bhcpress.com. So you could read about them there. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram as myself, and Twitter at Writer Gary.
Wonderful. Perfect. All right, everybody. So I'm going to have links for all that in the show notes.
Thank you.
As well as links to our past episodes, episode 118 and 167. So you all can go back and hear some of our past discussions, like the idiosyncrasies of writing, characters that take over, which we touched on some of that today. One of the fascinating discussions we had was using Zoom for theater production. We talked about Sharknado, and of course, the ever-present everything bagel with a smear of cream cheese.
Yes, you got that. Yes. Very, so, it expands the mind.
It does.
So try it.
That's right. So all of that will be in the show notes. Next week, everybody, make sure you tune back in so you can hear a sample chapter for the ending of the Dark Deaths novel trilogy. It's A Dugout for Peace, coming out December 5th, but you can hear a sample from it next week. Gary, thank you so much for joining me. And I can't wait for next week. So until then, everybody, take care.
Thank you.